Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the broadcast. My name is Justice Knight. I can't thank you enough for being here. Today, I'm going to start with a request. I used a different page here because you can't see it if I click on my own, but I'm going to show you where to check if you're subscribed to my channel and also if you're being notified of new broadcasts. I use here another page, Lisa Havens, to put a yellow arrow around where to see if you're subscribed, and then the bell that's right next to it. If I was to unclick it, this is the sign you don't want to see because that means you're not notified of any upcoming videos I have. So make sure it is checked. It looks exactly like you see now on your screen, and you'll be good to go and know you're going to be notified when broadcasts like this come up. You'll see on your screen, fascism, Nazism, communism, and socialism are only superficial variations of the same monstrous theme, and that is collectivism. Now, you have to be very familiar with that term because we are heading towards something in this country which over the next 2 or 3 days, unless major breaking news happens, you are going to hear me cover in great depth. Today, it's going to start with an announcement that came out over the weekend. Bernie Sanders announces basically his complete prison reform, justice and safety for all. He quotes Nelson Mandela, who stated, "It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails." Now, there's portions of what he wrote and what's happening within our prison system that he is absolutely 100% right. There needs to be reform. We'll just take the opening paragraph, for example. "For most of our history as a country, the United States incarcerated people at about the same rates as other Western democracies do today. In the early 1970s, we had the same low crime rate as today, but we now have an incarceration rate 5 times higher. Indeed, America is now the world's leading jailer." Now, I'm going to show you where he gets that. He quotes that there's 2 million people in America incarcerated and another 5 million under the supervision of the correction system. Here's one of the graphs that goes to illustrate the incarceration rates in the United States in 2019. On this, he is absolutely correct. Keeping in mind, however, that as you don't see China and you don't see Russia, because they're never going to declare what those real numbers are in those communist bloc countries, which is quickly where we're heading and where I have great concerns. But nonetheless, there's accuracy in that statement. I'm not going to take him away from that. He goes on to say, and this is, you're going to see, this is a yin and yang back and forth here. "Triple national spending on indigent defense to $14 billion annually," simply meaning those who can't afford legal help that get in trouble are entitled to a defense. So that I can't argue with him on. But again, I don't know where this $14 billion is coming from. That's something I haven't had time to analyze. Go down a step further. "After review of current salaries and workload, set a minimum starting salary for all public defenders." You see, Bernie and most socialist communists just like him love to spend our money. They will spend us into servitude. And you have to very much keep that in mind when you're reviewing these agendas, because he intermingled much more than just the prison system. We're going to go point by point. I'm really staying on this document almost the entire broadcast, but we're going to go on. Hundreds of thousands of incarcerated people in America have not been convicted of a crime, are solely in jail because they can't afford their bail. We are criminalizing poverty. I don't disagree with that statement. We need less people in our prison system. Something has to change. Something has to be fixed. He makes this a race issue again, saying due to the historical legacy of institutionalized racism in this country, mass incarceration disproportionately falls on the shoulders of black and brown people in America. That actually hurts a lot when you see how they're using these words. I'm an American, you're an American. We stand hand in hand on these topics. I'm tired of the divide because no solutions will ever come to fruition if they continue to spew this divide and disparity between us. If the system's broke, the system broke. It needs to be fixed for all, not just for one segment of the population. When you have 1 in 28 children who has an incarcerated parent, we have a problem here in America. Now here's where we're going to start to divide. Because that would be great if this was just to stay on those talking points. But of course, as we know, it doesn't and will never. Start here. Ban for-profit prisons. Make the prison system the ownership fully of the U.S. government. It's beyond terrifying implications to that. Again, all these people just want to build government to a point that we're all going to be working for the government someday. That is where they're heading with all their deals. Audit the practices of commissaries and use regulatory authority to end price gouging and exorbitant fees. More government. Incentivize states and localities to end police departments' reliance on fines and fees for revenue. Now, this is the federal government reaching into the state government once again against everything that America stands for. He also, however, wants to put an authority who monitors all these people out of prison. More government, more Big Brother, more Orwell, heading into, again, collectivism, which we talked about at the beginning of the broadcast. We're going to take another step. Establish a federal no-call policy, including, now you ready for this? A registry of disreputable federal law enforcement officers so testimony from what they're deeming untrustworthy sources does not lead to criminal convictions. Provide financial support to pilot local and state level no-call lists. Once again, the federal government reaching its dingy large hand into the states, which they have absolutely zero right, trying to federalize the prison system, now saying that if you so-called deputy, we deem you as being an unreliable source because you may be speaking against our agenda points, you can no longer testify in a court of law because you're on the list. We've seen lately with Google and YouTube and censorship and suppression, there is many lists behind the scenes that are destroying people's lives. That's going to be in part 2 and 3 coming up when we start talking about gulag. Very specifically, and I use that term for very good cause. Oh, I'm going to be on a tear this week. I'm not going to stop. Remember the same man here who wants to protect the Constitution, but now Bernie's voting in favor of a nationwide ban of military-style assault weapons, a nationwide ban on high-capacity magazines of over 10 rounds, and a nationwide expanded background check that address unsafe loopholes. But now you're saying on one hand, you're going to protect the Constitution. On the other hand, you're going to take away my rights. Oh, you're just a perfect little socialist, communist shill, aren't you, Bernie? Provide more support to police officers and create a robust non-law enforcement alternate response system. Did you hear that? Provide more support to police officers and create a robust non-law enforcement alternative response system. Establish national standards for use of force by police that emphasize de-escalation, which goes back to this article. Peace Act requires cops to ask a suspect not to kill them. Instead of defending themselves, I must ask you first, sir. Please, large person coming at me with a gun and a knife and a weapon, preparing to kill me, please don't kill me before, because I can't fire my sidearm to protect myself until I ask you that question. This is the disarmament of all local law enforcement, which stand for them or against them. I stand for them. We need some law and order within our communities, or else everything would crumble into insanity. But nonetheless, this is where it's heading. Just more verification of things I've shown you weeks ago. But now remember the money and spend the money and spend the money. As President, Bernie will triple national spending on indigent defense of $14 billion, which we covered early. Now we're going to continue down even further into this thought process of why socialism, communism, is going to destroy America. Free college, Green New Deal, socialist healthcare, study fines, now redo the prison system. And what's this going to do to our country? This article is very good at pointing out exactly what it's going to do. Because folks, it can't be funded. They say even if you tax everybody at 100% of their income, everybody who makes over $200,000, and you tax every single person 100% of that income, it will not even nearly raise the amount to cover all the programs they're proposing. So let's add in all corporate taxes. It still won't cover all the money that they're proposing on spending. So know what happens then? They trickle down into the middle class, which they're saying they're going to protect. And then it will trickle down into the underprivileged, which they're saying they're going to protect. And eventually, when we all go bust, we're now all servants to the government, which is exactly where all these programs always lead. So now taking a step further, enact a prisoner bill of rights that guarantees ending solitary confinement, access to free medical care. At least he's consistent. He wants to give everybody medical care at all points in time, even though the way they're proposing it, nobody could ever afford to roll out these programs. And then they want to establish right here the right to vote. All voting age Americans must have the right and meaningful access to vote, whether they are incarcerated or not. We will re-enfranchise the right to vote to the millions of Americans who have had their vote taken away by a felony conviction. That should leave you scratching your head as to why now that needs to be changed back. Because those that violate the law should not be voting as to how laws should be enacted or who should be enacting those laws, to be more particular. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some system over a great amount of time that wouldn't change that, but the way they're proposing it is just a broad brush to fix everything. Create a federal agency responsible for monitoring reentry. Remember when I said bigger government and bigger government? Now they have a monitoring reentry department. Ban the box by removing questions regarding conviction history from jobs and other applications. You can no longer ask if you've committed a felony or a violent crime, according to what Bernie's asking for here, because ordinary Americans don't have the right to know who they're putting in the workplace with maybe your son or daughter. And let's make sure we fund everything else that's involved in this program. Fund programs for people who are at serious risk of being either the perpetrator or victim of gun violence. Provide non-law enforcement-led services. But let's step back here real quick. Fund programs for people who are at serious risk of being the perpetrator of gun violence. Let's provide people who may, this is again precognitive laws. I may think you're going to involve yourself in gun violence. So I'm going to provide you education and housing and food and transportation just to assure maybe I can mitigate that risk based on the assumption. How are you going to assume who's going to do that? What bias will you potentially use? Now, I had to zoom in and make this full screen because it's imperative you do not miss the second point. The first of legalize marijuana and vacate and expunge past marijuana convictions. I know a lot of people who would not disagree with that necessarily. However, this point, and the reason you are full screen right now, is it states legalize safe injection sites and needle exchanges around the country and support pilot programs for supervised injection sites, which have shown to substantially reduce drug overdose deaths. That's right, legalized injection sites. What is Bernie Sanders proposing? Legalize marijuana, make it safer to inject drugs into your system, but don't worry because that will substantially reduce drug overdose deaths. This is why I say you have to read almost every single line of these proposed ideas or legislations prior to ever signing off on anything. And just in closing, you think that's where he'd end this, right? Oh no. He puts in the $15 minimum wage, a federal jobs guarantee to provide good jobs at living wage, revitalization, and taking care of the community, spending money, and there it is, Medicare for all, spending more money, enact paid family leave, spending more money. He can't help himself at this point in time. This is the communist way, a way to take over America, serve everybody into servitude. But the question here is, and what I'm going to ask all of you, is how much do you know about collectivism and what it's going to lead to? Because this cute little sign here says, enjoy collectivism if you survive the purges. You've seen the movies. Unfortunately, my friends, I'm going to cover with you over the next 2 or 3 days, including today, because if they just mass release 50% of the prison population tomorrow, and of course they're sitting up on their pulpit saying how they did it and how good they are, what happens to the rest of us? When they convince them that it's the rich who did all the ills and those who haven't committed the crimes that did all the ills of the country, I'm going to show you a very old purge that happened and threw everybody into prisons and how they wiped out the top level of the military and all political officials and everybody who disagreed with the narrative, much like Google's doing to many YouTubers and those who believe in freedom of speech today. And I promise you, by the time you're done with it, you'll understand exactly how bad things have become. And Bernie has always been that shining example to show you exactly how they smile on one side and stab you in the back on the other. And that I will always keep you awake to, and why I've gone in such detail through this broadcast today. So until next time, if you haven't subscribed, I certainly hope you will. I can't thank you again enough for being here. I look forward to your comments. I look forward to your thumbs up. And please help share this video. So Godspeed and God bless. Until next time, Justice Knight, signing out.